Hello again. I went to review Bernat Tiny Tickles yarn. When I looked on the website, when I saw this yarn, I didn't know what size the skein would be. So this helps you see what size one normal skein of Bernat Tiny Tickles is. And there is a pattern on the Yarnspirations website to make a blanket with just one ball of this. So that's probably what I'm going to do since I only have one ball. Anyway, on the label, there's a pattern to make a corner-to-corner blanket, which calls for 3 balls. This is made for baby things, of course. Now, when I opened this, I was very surprised by how soft it is. It is so much softer than I thought it would be. For some reason, I was thinking that it would feel like the Bernat Pipsqueak yarn, but it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels completely different. You can feel the thread, the binding thread, as you feel the yarn. The Bernat Pipsqueak, you don't feel the thread at all, but with this you do. But it just feels different. It feels a whole lot softer than I thought it would feel, and it's thinner than I thought it would be. See, it's not very thick at all. It's a medium weight yarn. And it has a little tiny squiggly, it's like an eyelash, but it doesn't feel like an eyelash, and it doesn't operate like an eyelash yarn, but it is an eyelash because it's got little kinky curls of yarn here. And they're very soft because of how kinky they are. So it's a very curly eyelash yarn. Pardon me. Let's read the label. 250 grams, 8.82 ounces. It's about 290 meters or 317 yards. Made by Bernat. Made in Canada and China. I can't read today. It's actually on not on the Bernat website because that was, it's all mixed in now with Yarnspirations. So go to yarnspirations.com. The color I have of this yarn is called Citrus Smiles. I love it. It is so soft. Machine washable and dryable. Yay! It's a medium yarn. It calls, it's 100% polyester. It calls for a size 9 knitting needle, 5.5 millimeter. You'll get 16 stitches in a 4x4 swatch, 4 inches or 10 centimeters. It calls for a size I9 crochet hook, 5.5 millimeter, and you'll get 14 single crochets in a 10 centimeter or 4 inch swatch. And like I said, it's machine washable and dryable. No iron, of course, because it will be impossible to iron. And that's all I see on the label. And inside the label is where you'll find that pattern. And I went ahead and pulled from the center of the skein so I could get it started, and I had a little bit of a pile here that came out, which is to be expected with a great big ball like this. But it's not as much as it looks like. It's pretty flat. It's a small amount. There's still quite a bit of yarn left there. So we're going to try to knit with this yarn first. I'm going to use some size 9 plastic knitting needles and see how it knits. It's very fluffy. Very, very lightweight. And I'm casting on loosely the long tail method. I always use long tail, it seems like. Seems to just work with everything. That's enough of that. Let's try to knit with it. It's hard to see these stitches, but it's easy to feel them because of that binding thread. And it knits very easily. Just have to look out for those kinky curls occasionally. Make sure you don't work through them. And it works very smoothly with these plastic knitting needles. So if you have plastic knitting needles, they will work very well with this yarn. These are the only size 9 knitting needles I have, so I cannot try bamboo or metal needles with this. So we'll just have to go with what we're seeing with these plastic needles. It knits very easily. Now I'm going to try to purl with it. See how that goes. But I don't think you'd really need to purl much with this because of how fluffy it is. But if you wanted to make a flat fabric, flatter than garter stitch would be, then you could purl with this. And it does purl easily because of that binding thread. It makes it easy to feel the stitches as you work. So let me do a couple more rows in stockinette. Get that tail out of the way. Get your tail out of the way. Alright, let's try to knit with that. And it's still working easily. I can see that it would be easy to split this yarn though because of all those little curly cues hanging out in the way. So I would not recommend this for beginners. It will be better for someone to use if they're already familiar with working a knit stitch and how it should flow. I think beginners would have a little trouble working with this yarn. But for those of us who've been knitting and already know how the stitches work, we can do it. And beginners could use it, but they would be frustrated because of the way it tends to catch sometimes. They wouldn't understand what's going on. They'd think it was their fault when it's the yarn. Gives them a little bit of trouble occasionally. There. So that works very pretty. I love how it looks. Now, let's purl one more row. You know what? I think I'll knit now so I can see how garter stitch works. Let's just knit a couple rows. So if you've been knitting for a month or two, then you have the experience that you need to work with this yarn. Because it feels pretty good. Feels nice. It's always good to practice knitting with just a standard yarn and then play with these more interesting yarns. And it'll just make you enjoy the experience more. I do like the fabric this makes. It is so soft. These plastic needles I have are so pointy, aren't they? It might work easier with a yarn that doesn't have such a sharp point. I mean, with a needle that doesn't have such a sharp point. After you work with it for a while, you feel it and it just happens. Flows. Alright. I don't see a difference at all in the stockinette fabric and the garter stitch fabric. The garter stitch is a tiny bit thicker. Not much though. So if it were me and I were making a project with this, I would just do garter stitch the whole way because you're not going to really see stockinette in this. You can feel the difference in the fabric, just slightly, but it looks exactly the same. Nice little fluffy fabric, very soft. All this would be so cute for making baby booties, little fluffy baby booties, or a baby jacket, or baby cardigan, or baby hats. It's very lightweight. There's hardly any weight at all to that yarn. It's very fluffy and bouncy and squishy. Makes a good soft fabric. I think a baby would enjoy feeling this. And it would be good for a baby blanket, of course. So let's unravel it and see how easily it unravels. Oh yeah, real nice. Smooth like butter. That feels good. It's got a little catch here with the last row, which is to be expected. So if you get it completely hung up on that last row, you won't be sacrificing a lot of yarn, just a little bit. So the last row is a little bit more of a challenge. Just be patient with it. There. So now let's try to crochet And the only size eye hook I have is a rosewood. Oh man, so I'm using a fancy hook with a baby yarn. We'll see how this works. I got this fancy hook at Tuesday morning little outlet store out here. Alright. So this is really hard to see the stitches. In fact, it is impossible. And I really can't feel them either. So you'd have to be a really experienced crocheter to try to crochet with this. I mean, I'm doing it, but it is not easy at all. It might be better on the next row, but oh, I can't feel it. I'm afraid I might be working in the same hole. Okay, let's try there. That's a little bit better. It might be easier after you work for a while, but I think I would recommend knitting with this yarn because it's just kind of hard. Yeah, it's not easy at all, especially on the first row. It might be easier with a metal hook instead of this luxury rosewood thing. I'm determined to make it through to the end of this row, though. It's really hard to feel the spot where I'm working because this yarn is so soft that it's hard to tell where the openings are. I think I have one stitch left here, so I should have counted when I was making my chains. So we'll say that's the last one. And now I'm going to turn and see if it's any easier on the second row. Not much. It's still hard. I think this will be much easier with knitting needles. Because it just makes fluff. You know, it's just so fluffy. It's really hard to find where the hole is. I mean, if you are determined to crochet with this yarn, you go right ahead. But I don't think I would want to. I would rather knit because it's really hard to feel the stitches. So if you do crochet with this, stick with a very simple pattern, because a complicated pattern would drive you crazy trying to figure out where the holes are. Alright, so makes a nice fabric and crochet really thick, but it is a pain to crochet. It's not hard, it's not easy to feel, and it's just, I don't enjoy it. Maybe it would be better with a different hook, but with my rosewood hook it's not fun. So I would recommend knitting with this yarn, and I would recommend a person who is already familiar with the knit stitch to work with it. It's hard to unravel crochet with this too. It's just grabbing hold of itself. Just takes patience, just like it did for unraveling the knitting, but unraveling knitting was a lot easier. So I would recommend knitting for this yarn, making baby blankets and stuff. It is very soft and cushy, and it would make a lovely soft blanket when you finish, or booties or hat. So have fun with Bernat Tiny Tickles. See you soon. Bye.